In life, we all come across people with different characters. Some inspire us, give us strength, and push us toward growth. But there are also those whom we can recognize within the very first minutes of conversation. We sense their level of thinking, their worldview, and their way of life. To understand a person, you don't need to spend years with them. Often just a few of their sentences, the decisions they make, and the way they treat others reveal everything. The Stoic philosophers used to say, a person's worth is not in what they say, but in what they show. Because words can sometimes deceive, but behavior never hides the truth. Foolish people often seem harmless at first glance. They may appear as if they're just making silly mistakes or careless decisions, but in reality, their narrow thinking, inability to control their emotions, selfish approach, and irrational actions can harm not only themselves but also those around them. That's why it's important to recognize such people early, so we can make wiser choices in life, build friendships with the right individuals, and protect ourselves from negative influence. But how can we identify them? That's exactly what we'll discuss in this video. Today, through the lens of Stoic philosophy, I'll show you 7 clear signs of a foolish person. I'll explain each sign in detail, so that when you encounter such people in your life, you'll immediately recognize them and know how to keep the right distance. If you subscribe to my channel and like this video, I'll be truly glad, because it will also mean that more people can benefit from this wisdom. One of the greatest and most dangerous traits of a foolish person is that they never see themselves as wrong. For them, saying "I was wrong" feels like denying their very existence. Instead of admitting mistakes, even when they are clearly mistaken, they come up with excuses, twist the matter in another direction, and try to justify themselves. And that brings us to the first sign of a foolish person. They always think they're right. In their eyes, a conversation is not a healthy dialogue to discover the truth. For them, every discussion is simply a battle to prove their correctness. No matter how strong the evidence presented by the other side, they won't listen. They only wait for a chance to declare their own arguments as the victory. The Stoic said, "A wise man speaks not to be right, but to know what is right." This is a profound lesson, because for the wise, the goal is not to feed the ego, but to discover the truth. But for the fool, the priority is not accepting reality, but defending their own stance, even when that stance is completely wrong. At the root of this behavior often lie ego and fear. Ego because they hate the thought of being wrong. Fear because they believe that admitting mistakes will make them look weak. Yet in truth, admitting mistakes is a sign of strength. It shows that a person is open to learning and growth. When talking to such people, you'll often notice that they seem as if they're listening to you, but in reality they're just preparing a response. For them, listening is not about understanding, it's about reacting. That's why conversations with these people usually become exhausting. You strive to move closer to the truth, while they fight only to appear as the winner. What's most interesting is that even when such people believe they've won a discussion, in reality, they've lost the chance to grow. According to Stoic philosophy, true victory is not in defeating someone else, but in overcoming one's own ego and mistakes. If the person in front of you considers admitting a mistake as weakness, know that this is a sign of deep ignorance. This very trait damages relationships over time, destroys friendships, and creates conflicts in the workplace. Because working with such people is like talking to a wall. Your voice bounces back, but no real echo ever comes. The wise approach is not to seek victory in every discussion, but to remain open-minded in pursuit of truth. Remember this, when a person admits their mistake, they are not belittling themselves. They are, in fact, elevating themselves. One of the clearest signs of a foolish person is their inability to control their emotions. Such people overreact to everything. A small word, even a harmless joke, can trigger an explosive outburst of anger. And this is the second sign. For them, every situation feels like a personal attack. It's as if the entire world is against them, and everyone is working to bring them down. Stoic philosophy, however, taught the opposite, that Emotional stability is one of life's most essential skills. Marcus Aurelius said, "It is not events that disturb you, but your judgments about them." In other words, it's not what happens, but the meaning we attach to what happens that causes us distress. People who cannot control their emotions often make impulsive decisions. When they're angry, they cannot speak wisely. When they're anxious, they cannot make sound choices. As a result, they harm both themselves and those around them. That's why their lives are filled with regrets. "I wish I hadn't said that," or "I wish I hadn't reacted that way." Their behavior tends to follow a pattern: event, emotional explosion, regret, but no lesson learned. Why? Because they view these reactions as normal. They defend themselves with phrases like, "That's just who I am." But this is not personality. It is simply poor self-control. A wise person knows that managing emotions doesn't mean suppressing them. It's not about denying feelings, but about directing them properly. The Stoics taught that whoever controls their emotions controls their life. Building relationships with emotionally unstable people is extremely difficult. When you speak with them, you feel as if you're constantly walking on eggshells. You never know when or over what word they'll suddenly explode. This poisons relationships and destroys mutual trust. If you have such people in your life, the Stoic approach is to maintain emotional distance. Because no matter how calm you are, they can unleash their storm on you at any moment. And that storm doesn't just bring a brief burst of anger. It creates long-term stress and tension. Another obvious trait of a foolish person is their lack of consistency in life. One day they defend one opinion, the next day they say the complete opposite. It's as if their lives are not guided by solid principles, but by moods and random feelings. And this is the third sign. In dealing with such people, you'll often encounter situations like this. Yesterday they insisted, "This must absolutely be done." But today, without any explanation, they'll say it's not important. This is not just about changing one's mind. It's about lacking stable thoughts and values. They often let emotions control them and forget about logic. For example, in a burst of strong emotions, they make a sudden decision. Later, when the emotions fade, they realize the decision wasn't right. But unfortunately, by then the consequences have already begun to show. What's more dangerous is that unstable decisions affect not only their own lives, but also the lives of those around them. If you work with such a person, you can't be sure they'll keep a promise tomorrow that they made today. If this person is a family member, their sudden change of plans will forcefully drag you along with them. A wise person, on the other hand, always makes decisions based on principles and values. This doesn't mean they never change their mind. On the contrary, when new information arises, they reconsider their decision, but they do it based on reason, not fleeting emotions. If you are close to such people, you'll constantly live in uncertainty. You won't know what they'll do tomorrow, what stance they'll take, or what choice they'll make. This unpredictability disrupts your rhythm of life and destroys your inner balance. The fourth sign of a foolish person is their constant criticism of others. For them, no one is ever good enough. Your success is not something to be congratulated. Instead, it becomes an opportunity to look for flaws. Such people find it easier to focus on other people's lives rather than on their own. Because belittling someone else's achievements is the cheapest way to hide their own failures. They magnify the smallest mistakes in others, yet turn a blind eye to their own. The Stoics describe such people as those who try to hide their inner darkness by extinguishing someone else's light. Their criticism is often born out of jealousy, ego, and dissatisfaction. They constantly judge others: who wore what, who did what, who said what. All of these things form their daily list of topics. And what's ironic is that they talk a lot, but take no real steps to make meaningful changes in their own lives. Being around such people is draining. You hesitate to share your achievements or joys with them because you know they will either belittle your success or stab you with a hidden remark that ruins your mood. At the root of this habit lies inner dissatisfaction. A person unhappy with their own life cannot digest another's happiness. That's why they seize every opportunity to criticize. It's their way of lifting themselves up by pulling others down. From the Stoic perspective, there is no need to argue with someone who constantly criticizes others. Don't take their words personally. More often than not, their words are not about you at all. They are simply an echo of their own inner struggles. In the life of a foolish person, real facts, accurate knowledge, and deep understanding are very rare. Their main source of information is gossip, unverified news from social media, and rumors about other people. This is the fifth sign. For them, the most interesting gatherings are the ones where they sip on the tea of other people's lives and discussing who did what, who spoke to whom, and who made which mistake. The danger is that such conversations rarely bring any benefit, yet they damage people's names, reputations, and relationships. The Stoics saw this habit as a kind of spiritual disease. Marcus Aurelius said, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it discussing other people's lives." The wise spend their time gathering knowledge, improving themselves, and doing useful work. The foolish, however, waste their lives by spending it on others, leaving their own life empty. When you interact with such people, you'll notice that most of what they talk about is not based on facts but on hearsay. They often begin sentences with, "I heard that," but you'll rarely hear them say, "I researched." Or there is evidence that the culture of gossip not only increases negative feelings toward others. Since everyone has flaws, hearing about them daily makes it harder to think positively about people, but it also puts the gossiper in danger, because eventually others will speak about them in the same way. The wise approach is to value and weigh the worth of information. If a piece of information brings no benefit, harms others, or does not help us grow, then speaking it or even listening to it is nothing but a waste of time and a pollution of the soul. The sixth sign is their intolerance to criticism. One of the most typical traits of a foolish person is their inability to handle criticism. For them, any remark, any suggestion for correction, even if spoken in the gentlest way, is immediately taken as a personal attack. To such people, the words "you were wrong" sound like "you are worthless." A wise person, however, sees criticism as a mirror. The mirror shows you the truth, whether you like it or not. But a foolish person tries to shatter that mirror because facing the truth disturbs their ego. Such people usually respond to criticism in three main ways. 1. Denial. "No, I didn't do that," even when the facts are obvious. 2. Defense. They quickly rush to justify themselves and redirect the issue. 3. Attack. They retaliate by criticizing the person who corrected them, trying to expose their flaws instead. Stoic philosophy considered criticism one of the most valuable tools for learning and growth. Epictetus said, "Do not see the person who wants to correct you as an enemy, but as a teacher," because true criticism reveals the mistakes we cannot see, giving us the chance to become better. People who are intolerant of criticism are like locking themselves in a closed room. They only hear their own voice and live, without ever listening to the perspectives of others. This inevitably leads them to repeat the same mistakes again and again. Working with such people is especially difficult. Even when you offer constructive feedback, they immediately become offended or aggressive. Over time, those around them stop giving any feedback at all. As a result, these individuals never realize their mistakes and continue to regress further. The wise approach is to avoid taking criticism as a personal attack. Instead, we should extract the useful part and apply it, while calmly discarding the unnecessary part. Because if a person is not open to criticism, they are not open to change. And someone who is not open to change will inevitably fall behind in life. Finally, the seventh sign of a foolish person is their tendency to waste their time on meaningless activities and shallow entertainments. For them, the true purpose of life is not growth, but fleeting pleasures, meddling in other people's lives, wasting hours on social media, pointless arguments, gossip, trivial shows, and distractions. According to Stoic philosophy, time is the most precious resource of life. Marcus Aurelius said, "Do not waste even a part of your day on empty things. To lose time is to lose life itself." Life is short and fleeting, and each of us must be conscious of how we spend it. Foolish people fail to understand this. They invest their hours in idle talk, baseless rumors, and activities that bring no long-term benefit. As a result, they not only halt their own growth but also drain the time and energy of those around them. What's more concerning is that they make no effort to realize the value of time. They often excuse themselves by saying, "I have time," but in reality, this is just a sign of carelessness and a lack of proper priorities. A wise person, on the other hand, uses time intelligently. They read, learn, reflect, improve themselves, and cultivate meaningful relationships. Their daily life is not filled with pointless distractions. Every action has a purpose. Spending time with a foolish person, however, drains your energy. At the end of the day, you realize the time has passed, yet you've gained nothing. According to Stoic philosophy, who and what you give your time to ultimately defines who you are. The time you waste on such people does not invest in your own life. It only contributes to their empty world. Remember, time spent on worthless things never returns. That's why you should direct your life toward activities that foster growth, knowledge, and inner strength. A foolish person does the opposite, consuming every opportunity to waste both their time and yours. So if you recognize even a few of these 7 signs in people around you, be cautious. Their narrow mindset, unstable decisions, inability to control emotions, and meaningless habits can drain your energy, weaken your clarity of thought, and even disrupt your rhythm of life. Such people often try to cover up their own emptiness by belittling others' achievements. Staying around them for too long can create anxiety, stress, and even self-doubt. One of the greatest lessons of Stoic philosophy is this: the people you spend your time with determine who you become. Those around you influence you. Their energy, mindset, and behavior shape your inner state. That's why one of the most important choices in life is choosing your circle wisely. You must share your time, energy, and attention only with people who contribute to your growth, strength, and happiness. Remember, life is short and every day is an opportunity. Every time you spend your energy on narrow-minded, negative, or draining people, you lose a piece of yourself. But if you invest that same energy into your growth, knowledge, and inner depth, every step will make you stronger, wiser, and calmer. So protect yourself. Don't waste time with people who constantly project their weaknesses onto others. Don't indulge in their meaningless criticism or gossip. Don't let their unstable decisions, constant dissatisfaction, or intolerance of criticism pull you down with them. Instead, surround yourself with those who lift you up, who add value to your thoughts, your spirit, and your life. Thank you for watching until the end. If you found this video helpful, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with your friends. Your single share can help these Stoic lessons reach more people and positively impact their lives too. Every click, every subscription, and every share has the power to create change, not just in your life, but in the lives of others as well. Remember, by choosing who you spend your time with, you are also choosing the quality of your life. The people around you shape you, but your choices determine how much you allow their influence. So be wise, guard your energy, and fill your life with people who add value. Every minute is an investment. Don't spend it on emptiness, spend it on growth. See you in the next video.